What happens when a controversial royal meets one of Britain's most unflinching television hosts? You won't believe what unfolds when Prince Harry sits down for what was meant to be a straightforward promotional appearance, only to find himself facing the relentless questioning of Kevin O'Sullivan. The tension was palpable from the moment the Duke of Sussex walked onto the set, and what started as polite conversation quickly descended into one of the most explosive confrontations in recent television history. Before we get into this incredible story, make sure you hit that subscribe button and drop a comment below because you're not going to believe what unfolds when these two powerhouses clash live on air. Last night's episode began like any other, with Kevin O'Sullivan adjusting his tie and shuffling through his notes as the production team made final preparations. The studio audience was buzzing with anticipation, knowing they were about to witness something special. Prince Harry had agreed to appear on the show to discuss his latest charitable initiatives, but anyone familiar with O'Sullivan's interviewing style knew this wouldn't be a gentle conversation. As the cameras rolled and the familiar theme music faded, O'Sullivan flashed his trademark sardonic smile. "Good evening, I'm Kevin O'Sullivan, and tonight we have a very special guest. Please welcome the Duke of Sussex, Prince Harry." The applause was polite but measured as Harry walked onto the set, his demeanor confident yet guarded. He settled into the guest chair, straightening his blazer and offering a practiced smile to the audience. "Your Royal Highness, thank you for joining us tonight," O'Sullivan began, his tone deceptively cordial. "I understand you're here to talk about your work with veterans and mental health awareness. Noble causes, certainly." Harry nodded, seemingly at ease. "Thank you for having me, Kevin. Yes, these are issues incredibly close to my heart. Having served in Afghanistan myself, I've seen firsthand the struggles our servicemen and women face when they return home. It's something I'm passionate about addressing." O'Sullivan leaned back in his chair, his fingers steepled. "Indeed, your military service is well documented. 2 tours of duty, if I'm not mistaken. Tell me, during your time in the Army, did you ever imagine you'd one day be living in California, making millions from Netflix deals, while lecturing the rest of us about public service?" The question hung in the air like a loaded weapon. Harry's smile faltered slightly, but he maintained his composure. "I think that's a rather reductive way of looking at it, Kevin. My wife and I have used our platform to shine a light on important issues. The work we're doing isn't about personal gain." "Isn't it?" O'Sullivan pressed, his voice taking on that familiar edge that regular viewers knew meant business. "Because, from where I'm sitting, it looks like you've turned personal grievances into a rather lucrative cottage industry. Books, documentaries, interviews, all painting your family in the worst possible light while you profit from the drama." Harry shifted uncomfortably in his seat, his jaw tightening. "That's not what this is about. We've shared our truth because we felt we had no other choice. The institution failed to protect my wife and my family." "Your truth?" O'Sullivan repeated, emphasizing each word with barely concealed disdain. "How convenient that your truth always seems to cast you and Meghan as the victims while everyone else, your father, your brother, your stepmother, they're all the villains in this narrative you've constructed." The temperature in the studio seemed to drop several degrees. Harry's media training was evident as he tried to redirect the conversation. "Kevin, I didn't come here tonight to relitigate family matters. I came to talk about the important work we're doing with—" "But that's just it, isn't it?" O'Sullivan interrupted, his voice rising slightly. "You can't separate the work from the way you've conducted yourself. You want to be taken seriously as an advocate for mental health, while simultaneously trashing your own family's mental health in public. You want to be seen as a champion of service, while abandoning the ultimate form of service, your duty to the crown." Harry's composure was beginning to crack. His hands gripped the armrests of his chair, and there was a flash of something dangerous in his eyes. "You don't know what you're talking about. You have no idea what we went through, what my wife endured, the racism, the harassment, the complete lack of support from the institution." O'Sullivan sensed blood in the water. "Oh, I think I know exactly what I'm talking about. I've been covering the royal family for decades. What I see is a man who had everything: privilege, position, purpose, and threw it all away because his wife didn't like the rules that come with the territory. "Don't you dare bring my wife into this," Harry snapped, his voice sharp with warning. The audience could feel the shift, the electric tension that comes when civility begins to crumble. "I'm afraid she brought herself into it the moment she started giving tell-all interviews," O'Sullivan replied coolly. "The moment she sat down with Oprah and made accusations that have never been substantiated. Accusations that painted your grandmother, God rest her soul, as the head of a racist institution." Harry's face flushed red. "Those weren't accusations, they were facts. My grandmother was a wonderful woman, but the institution around her was toxic. It nearly destroyed my mother, and it was destroying my wife." "Your mother," O'Sullivan said, his voice taking on a more pointed tone. "Let's talk about Diana for a moment." Here was a woman who, despite her struggles with the royal family, never completely turned her back on her duties. Even after the divorce, she remained committed to her charitable work and maintained her dignity. "Can you honestly say you've followed her example?" The mention of his mother seemed to strike a nerve deeper than anything else. Harry's voice trembled with barely controlled rage. "How dare you invoke my mother's memory to attack me? You didn't know her. You don't get to use her as a weapon against me." "I'm not using her as a weapon," O'Sullivan replied, his tone maddeningly calm. "I'm pointing out the contrast. Your mother faced immense pressure and personal attacks, but she didn't run away to California and spend years airing the family's dirty laundry for profit." The studio had fallen completely silent except for the low hum of the cameras. Even the production crew seemed frozen, sensing they were witnessing something unprecedented. Harry was breathing heavily, his composure hanging by a thread. "You want to know what my mother would think?" Harry said, his voice low and dangerous. "She'd be appalled by what that institution has become. She'd be horrified by how they treated my wife, just like they treated her." O'Sullivan wasn't backing down. Or perhaps she'd be disappointed by a son who chose personal comfort over duty, who chose Hollywood over service, who chose to burn bridges rather than build them. The words hit their mark. Harry's face contorted with rage, and for a moment it looked like he might leap from his chair. The tension had reached a breaking point, and everyone in the studio could sense that something explosive was about to happen. But what came next would push this confrontation into territory that no one in that studio was prepared for. As the cameras continued rolling, capturing every micro-expression and heated exchange, the conversation was about to take a turn that would leave both men's reputations hanging in the balance. "You know what, Kevin?" Harry said, his voice shaking with controlled fury as he leaned forward in his chair. "You sit there in your comfortable studio, making judgments about people you've never met, situations you've never experienced. You're nothing more than a tabloid hack, dressed up as a serious journalist." The insult landed like a physical blow. O'Sullivan's eyes narrowed, and his trademark smirk vanished completely. "Tabloid hack? That's rich coming from someone who sold out his own family to the highest bidder. At least I don't pretend to be something I'm not." "I've never pretended anything," Harry shot back, his voice rising. "Everything I've said has been the truth. Unlike the palace's spin doctors and their media lapdogs like you, I don't deal in lies and cover-ups." O'Sullivan's laugh was cold and bitter. "Truth? Let's talk about truth, shall we? The truth is that you were given every privilege imaginable from birth. The finest education, military training, a platform to make a real difference, and you threw it all away because your wife couldn't handle the fact that she wasn't going to be the star of the show." "Leave my wife out of this," Harry roared, half rising from his chair. Several security personnel stepped closer to the set, unsure whether to intervene. The studio audience sat in stunned silence, many filming on their phones despite the no-recording policy. "I can't leave her out of it because she's the root cause of all this drama," O'Sullivan continued relentlessly. "Before Meghan, you were the people's prince. You had purpose, respect, a role that mattered. Now look at you, reduced to a bitter man-child who can't mention his family without throwing a tantrum." Harry's composure finally shattered completely. "You want to talk about tantrums? What about your pathetic career spent tearing down people better than you? What about spending decades writing poison about my mother while she was alive, then pretending to respect her memory now that she's gone. The accusation hung in the air like a toxic cloud. O'Sullivan's face went pale, then flushed red with anger. I never wrote poison about your mother. I reported the news, which is more than I can say for the sanitized propaganda you're peddling now. Sanitized propaganda? Harry laughed bitterly. You mean telling the truth about racism in the royal family? About the complete failure of the institution to protect its members? About watching my wife contemplate suicide while the palace worried more about protecting their precious image than protecting her life? O'Sullivan seized on the opening. Ah, yes, the suicide claims. Conveniently unprovable allegations designed to generate maximum sympathy and deflect from legitimate criticism. Tell me, if things were really that desperate, why didn't you seek help immediately, instead of sitting on it for years until it became profitable to share? The question was like throwing gasoline on a fire. Harry's face went from red to almost purple with rage. Profitable? You think this has been profitable? Do you have any idea what it's cost us? The relationships destroyed, the bridges burned, the constant attacks from people like you? Oh, please, O'Sullivan scoffed. Spare me the victim routine. You've made millions from your sob story. Netflix deals, book advances, speaking fees, all built on trashing your family's reputation. If that's not profitable victimhood, I don't know what is. Harry stood up abruptly, his chair rolling backward. I've had enough of this. You're not interested in having a real conversation. You just want to score cheap points by attacking my family. Sit down, O'Sullivan commanded, his voice sharp. You came on this show voluntarily. You don't get to control the narrative here like you do in your carefully orchestrated media appearances. Watch me, Harry replied defiantly, but he remained standing, his hands clenched into fists at his sides. O'Sullivan pressed his advantage. This is exactly what I'm talking about. The moment someone challenges your version of events, you run away. Just like you ran away from your responsibilities. Just like you ran away from your country. Just like you're running away now. I didn't run away from anything, Harry snarled. I made a choice to protect my family from a toxic system that was destroying us from the inside out. Toxic system? O'Sullivan's voice dripped with disdain. You mean the same system that gave you everything you've ever had? The same system that your brother has embraced and made work beautifully? William seems to manage just fine with his wife and children. He doesn't need to flee to California and write tell-all books. The mention of his brother was the final straw. Harry's face contorted with a mixture of pain and rage. Don't you dare compare me to William. You have no idea what it's like being the spare, watching everything go to your older brother while you're expected to smile and be grateful for the scraps. The spare? O'Sullivan laughed harshly. You were beloved by the British people. You had a role, respect, purpose. You threw it all away because you couldn't handle not being first in line to the throne. That's not what this is about, Harry exploded. This is about a family that chose to protect their reputation over protecting their own members. This is about an institution so obsessed with its image that it was willing to sacrifice my wife's mental health and my children's future. O'Sullivan leaned back in his chair, a cruel smile playing at his lips. And there it is, the real truth. This isn't about racism or mental health or any of the noble causes you claim to champion. This is about a spoiled prince who didn't get his way and decided to burn everything down out of spite. The accusation seemed to physically stagger Harry. He gripped the back of his chair, his knuckles white with tension. You're wrong. You're completely wrong. Everything we've done has been about creating a better life for our children, about breaking the cycle of dysfunction that's plagued my family for generations. Breaking the cycle? O'Sullivan's voice was incredulous. By airing every piece of dirty laundry in public? By making your children's grandfather and uncle into villains in your personal drama? That's your idea of breaking the cycle? Harry's breathing was becoming increasingly labored. The studio felt like a pressure cooker ready to explode. My children will grow up knowing the truth about their family, not living a lie designed to protect an outdated institution. Your children will grow up reading about how their father humiliated their grandparents on international television. O'Sullivan shot back. They'll grow up knowing that their father chose money and fame over duty and honor. The words seemed to physically wound Harry. He stumbled backwards slightly, his face a mask of pain and fury. You don't know what you're talking about. You don't know anything about honor or duty. But O'Sullivan wasn't finished. He could sense victory and pressed forward with the ruthlessness of a predator sensing wounded prey. What happened next would push this confrontation beyond anything anyone could have imagined. You want to talk about honor and duty? O'Sullivan's voice cut through the tension like a blade. Let me tell you what I see. I see a man who wore his country's uniform with pride, who served alongside brave soldiers, who understood what sacrifice meant. And then I see what you've become, a Hollywood celebrity trading on royal titles you claim to despise. Harry's chest was heaving with barely controlled rage. You think you can psychoanalyze me? You think you understand what it means to serve when every move you make is scrutinized? When your family's dysfunction becomes front-page news? When you watch the woman you love being destroyed by the same forces that killed your mother? There it is again, O'Sullivan pounced. Always back to Diana. Always using your mother's tragedy to justify your choices. She died in a car accident, Harry. A tragic accident. She wasn't murdered by the royal family, no matter how much you want to believe that narrative. The words hit Harry like a physical blow. His face went white, then flushed with such intense anger that several people in the studio gasped audibly. How dare you? How dare you minimize what happened to my mother? She was hounded to death by people like you, by a media machine that treated her like a commodity instead of a human being. O'Sullivan's eyes glittered with malicious satisfaction. And yet here you are, feeding that same machine, giving interviews, writing books, making documentaries. You've become everything you claim to hate. You've turned your mother's memory into a business model. That's it, Harry roared, his voice echoing through the studio. I will not sit here and let you desecrate my mother's memory to score points in your pathetic little game show. He took a step toward O'Sullivan's desk, his fists clenched. Security guards moved closer, but they hesitated, unsure how to handle a situation involving a member of the royal family. The studio audience was on the edge of their seats, some people standing to get a better view of the unprecedented drama unfolding before them. O'Sullivan remained seated, but his posture was tense, ready to defend himself if necessary. Truth hurts, doesn't it? Your mother would be ashamed of what you've become. She believed in service, in duty, in putting others before yourself. Look at yourself now, a bitter, entitled man-child who can't handle criticism. My mother would understand exactly why I had to leave, Harry shot back, his voice breaking with emotion. She'd understand why I couldn't watch my wife go through what she went through. She'd understand why protecting my family meant more than protecting an institution that never protected us. Your wife, O'Sullivan said with venom. The woman who spent barely 2 years as a working royal before deciding it was too hard. The woman who convinced you to abandon everything your grandmother spent 70 years building. Tell me, what would the late Queen think of your choices? The mention of his grandmother seemed to shatter something inside Harry. Tears of rage and grief mixed on his face as he struggled to form words. My grandmother loved me. She understood. She supported our decision even if she couldn't say so publicly. O'Sullivan smelled blood in the water. Really? Is that why she stripped you of your military titles? Is that why she made it clear you were no longer welcome as working royals? That doesn't sound like support to me. She had no choice. Harry screamed, his composure completely destroyed. The institution made those decisions. She was trapped by the same system that trapped my mother, the same system that tried to trap my wife. The same system, O'Sullivan said coldly, that made you one of the most privileged people on earth. The same system that gave you purpose, meaning, and the platform you're still using to enrich yourself. You can't have it both ways, Harry. You can't claim to be a victim while profiting from your victimhood. Harry was shaking with rage, tears streaming down his face. The raw emotion was painful to watch, even for those who disagreed with his choices. You don't understand. You'll never understand what it's like to lose your mother at 12 years old, and then watch the same forces that destroyed her come after your wife and children. What I understand, O'Sullivan replied with brutal clarity, is that you've spent years blaming everyone else for your problems instead of taking responsibility for your choices. Your mother died in a tragic accident. Your father remarried and found happiness. Your brother embraced his role and thrived. But you? You chose to wallow in victimhood and drag everyone down with you. The accusation seemed to physically stagger Harry. He gripped the edge of O'Sullivan's desk, his knuckles white with tension. Wallow in victimhood? I've tried to build something positive from tragedy. I've tried to use my platform to help others, to make a difference. By attacking your family at every opportunity? O'Sullivan pressed relentlessly. By turning private conversations into public content? By making your children's grandfather into a villain in your personal soap opera? That's your idea of making a positive difference? Harry's face crumpled. The fight seemed to go out of him suddenly, replaced by a deep, profound sadness. I never wanted it to be this way. I just wanted my family to be safe. I wanted my children to have a normal life. For a moment, O'Sullivan's expression softened slightly, as if he recognized the genuine pain in Harry's voice. But then his professional instincts kicked in, and he pressed his advantage. Normal life? By making them the children of the most famous royal defectors in history? By ensuring they'll spend their lives answering questions about why their father abandoned his duties? The words reignited Harry's anger, but this time it was different, colder, darker, more controlled. My children will know that their father chose love over duty when the two became incompatible. They'll know that sometimes walking away takes more courage than staying. They'll know, O'Sullivan said with finality, that their father was too weak to handle the responsibilities that came with his privilege. They'll know that when things got difficult, he ran away rather than fight to make things better. Harry straightened up slowly, his face a mask of cold fury. And you'll be remembered as a bitter old man who spent his career tearing down people better than himself. History will judge which of us chose the right path. History, O'Sullivan replied with a sardonic smile, will remember you as the prince who had everything and threw it all away for 15 minutes of Hollywood fame. The silence that followed was deafening. Harry stood motionless for a long moment, staring at O'Sullivan with a mixture of hatred and pity. Then, without another word, he reached up and unclipped his wireless microphone, letting it fall to the floor with a sharp crack that echoed through the stunned studio. This interview is over, he said quietly, his voice carrying clearly through the silence. He turned toward the studio exit, his movements deliberate and controlled despite the emotional devastation written across his face. O'Sullivan called after him, unable to resist one final shot. Running away again, Harry? Just like always? Harry paused at the edge of the set, his back still turned to the host. For a moment, it seemed like he might turn around, might deliver some final devastating retort. Instead, he simply shook his head and continued walking. The studio doors swung shut behind him with a resounding bang, leaving O'Sullivan alone at his desk, the studio audience in shocked silence, and the cameras still rolling on what would undoubtedly become one of the most talked-about television moments of the year. The confrontation was over, but the reverberations would be felt for years to come.